welcome to the Rules of the Pit. We have the very talented Siegfried Meier with us to talk music and life behind the mixer. Siegfried, thank you for joining us.
Hi.
Now here at Rules of the Pit, we like an origin story. So if you could tell me, we'll start it off with what was young Siegfried like?
Oh, geez, here we go. Young Siegfried. Well, I grew up in Germany. I lived there until I was about 5 or 6 years old. And we moved to Canada, my family and I. Grew up on a farm, so it was definitely farm life for me, even when we came to Canada. But moving to Canada really opened me up to Western music. There was no more, because I mean, I came from Bavaria, so I mean, even on the radio in Bavaria in like the early 80s and late 70s, we didn't really get a whole lot of Western style music. So moving to this country, and watching like video hits and like, all of a sudden being exposed to Van Halen and Cyndi Lauper and Michael Jackson, like it was a culture shock to say the least. But tinkering with music gear and instruments and all sorts of shit, that kind of went back to when I was really little. My father, so there's 4 kids in my family, and I was the youngest. So while the other ones were quite a bit older than me, either helping out on the farm or doing whatever they did, there wasn't really a lot of time for Siegfried because he was so little. So rather than like accidentally have me get, swallowed up by a combine or something crazy on the farm, my parents would lock me in a room in the house, which sounds terrible by today's standards, but much safer than being dead. So, but my dad gave me a tape recorder, and that was the beginning of it for me. So I'd plug that damn thing in the wall and I'd tinker with it and record music off the radio. And, so I was always into like, buttons and knobs and cassettes and all sorts of that kind of shit. So I think when I came here and sort of got to really see what was possible, in terms of music. And I really have a bit of like musical background with my family. My grandfather played violin. I've got accordion in the family. Like there's not really any like technical musicians, I say, like without like gear wise. But growing up on the farm, my dad built a lot of stuff. So I watched a lot of hands-on welding and like mechanics and like, that part of it. So when when it came time to build my own equipment and the studio and all that kind of stuff, it just sort of like came naturally because it was really in my blood. So, but I guess that's the origins of me really. And, I mean, and then in my teens, of course, starting in a band and all that kind of stuff. That's, like everyone else really at that point.
So was it the band or was it something else that drew you into the production side of music?
Definitely the band, although I think when I was really little, sort of on my own playing with like a little organ or a keyboard, I used to make my own like tapes. I'd pretend I was like everything. I was like the label, I was in the band, I was the guy recording it, I was, like you play when you're like, 10 or 12 or whatever you are, so. But then when I actually started really playing a guitar, like probably grade 6, 7, that's really when I like got serious with it. And then being in the band for those years, we did records with other people in like the mid 90s, but I realized the other side of the glass could be more interesting, if not at least as interesting as being in the band. And I sort of excelled at that area. And then realizing that I cared more about our band than people we were paying to record us, I recognized pretty quickly that this is a viable career on my end. And it just kind of, blossomed from there. Yeah.
Well, speaking of your band, Curtis, you guys have been around for like quite a while, really. Like how Curtis come to be, and like what's been the greatest part of being in Curtis, but being Sig, the producer, like,
okay,
like together.
Well, the band has been around a long time, since probably around 93. So it was around that time that I moved to Stratford. I moved in with my sister, actually, for my later high school years. And that's when I met the rest of the dudes in the band there, Lenny, and you know Lenny probably, and whoever else happened to be in the band for all the, it's really just been me and Lenny for most of those years. And there's been a lot of hiatus years where we don't do a whole lot, and we'll just sort of pop back and do a song. And so I guess we've been around that long, but I don't know if you can really count it as that many years. But yeah, I don't know. It was being in a band and playing live, like that was a huge part of my early years, because obviously I fantasized about doing that forever. So, you know, it was definitely something that was important to me. And of course the networking aspect of it, like, you know, in the early to mid 90s, you didn't have the internet. We didn't have all the shit that these kids take for granted these days. So playing shows and just getting out and doing whatever you did was the only way to really, you know, I mean, even for me, like being someone who was okay being alone at home, tinkering in his own room for a lot of my life, you know, and still to this day, like I'm alone right now in the studio, tinkering and, you know, soldering and doing all sorts of weird shit. And, you know, but just, yeah, being in the band was like, it really opened my eyes as to what was possible, you know, even though I understood exactly, you know, what was capable, you know. I mean, I had an Amiga, I had a Commodore, I had a VIC-20, like, you know, having a computer and drum machines, and like you kind of have your own band already and you're creating. I used to use like cassette decks with mics inside them and record. Like, I remember I used the Rock Me Amadeus drum beat. Do you remember that? I actually used that and I created a fake loop to another tape deck. And then I'd record like really bad guitar over it. But that was before the days I didn't even know how to sample. I didn't even know what a 4-track was. Like, you know, so I kind of knew what a band was supposed to be. And I remember being really little and thinking that whenever I heard stuff on the radio, I thought the band was playing live every single time when I heard it on the radio. And I think to myself, wow, they are consistent. That sounds identical every time that motherfucker plays it. Like, you know, just the weird shit that you go through when you're really young and you don't fully understand technically how stuff works. And then you have this idea of how you think it works, you know? So, but I don't even remember what your question was. I kind of went off there, but
that's all good, man. Like that was way better than whatever I asked. I don't even remember what I asked.
Well, I mean, since we're into the recording and tinkering, which seemed all. I imagine you're fixing your own boards. You ain't sending them out for repair.
No, and I'm kind of in the middle of nowhere. So we're about 2.5 hours west of Toronto on the coast of Lake Huron. So I am a tech. I built a lot of my own gear. I built mic preamps, monitor controllers, EQs, compressors, you name it. I build lots of shit. And I repair what I can. Now, there is some stuff that I'm like, I can't figure out what the hell's going on. So I do have a host of techs that I take stuff to. If it's anything large, it's obviously they would have to come here, like a massive console or something. But thankfully, most of the desks that I work on are modular. You can pull out channels, you can do all that kind of stuff. But generally speaking, I mean, if I can't repair it, most often I send it to other guys and they can't fix it either. And it usually just sits around for a few years until either I get an epiphany while I'm sleeping or I happen to read something on the internet about it years later. I don't toss anything. Like, it's nice to have a big 3,000 square foot facility here because I can actually store some stuff, keep it, hang on to it. Because you just, I mean, you know, and I laugh about it because I've got enough projects to last well beyond the grave.
It's
my grandchildren will
purpose.
be taking care of it after I'm gone, you know, so.
You're a purposeful hoarder. You're a
Yeah, I mean, that's not really called hoarding if it's cool stuff, is it?
No, it's not.
You know,
See what's behind here.
Yeah.
It's collecting.
But I
It's
mean, again, like
collecting.
growing up on the farm and with my parents being just post-war, my dad was born in the war, but both my parents grew up in just post-war Germany. So to them, I mean, it was all useful stuff. So they always found a way to repurpose or recycle or rebuild or something. So I kind of got that end of it, even though I didn't get a ton of hands-on stuff because, again, like I said, I was the littlest one. So there wasn't a whole lot of time for me anymore. It was almost expected that I should already know most of that shit or just be able to be watching. And I should have already learned from watching as opposed to showing me how to do it. So
you're German. It comes naturally, damn it.
Right? That's exactly. I think that's what we thought, you know. So, but
German engineering.
Yeah, but it is nice to be able to do my own work. Saves a ton of money. You know, I mean, even when I built the studio first, I didn't even have enough mic preamps to track a drum kit. So, I mean, I was initially like racking older preamps and, you know, just scrounging whatever I could together just to make it work. You know, so Yeah.
Well, as far as Siegfried, the producer is concerned, like I noticed a majority of what you produced seemed to be on the metal side of things. How did you get hooked up with Face to Face?
I suppose. I think I kind of got pigeonholed into a lot of metal stuff for a bunch of years because I did win a Juno for a metal record, and I did some Thine Eyes Bleed stuff. They're a pretty popular metal band. The singer of Slayer's brothers in that band. So I think I just kind of got hooked into a lot of metal stuff because it was really popular, during those years. As far as the Face to Face connection goes, we were huge fans of that band way back in the mid 90s. So Lenny, our drummer, his family had a bakery, and before jam, we would always meet up at the bakery because he was finishing working for his parents. And he'd always have a new album. He had a CD player in the back, and he'd always have a new record to show me, whether it was Weezer's Blue record or whatever. He always had new shit. And I remember specifically when he showed me the Face to Face records, and we were all blown away. And the band instantly sort of transformed us to want to be a little bit more like that kind of sound. This is even like long post, like a couple of years after Green Day kind of broke big, and but they were just a little bit more left field. They were super melodic but technical, and it wasn't quite as simple as some of the basic punk rock stuff. And so my actual connection with it, so we were huge fans growing up, and it wasn't until around 2002 I did a record with a band called Seconds to Go out of London. So just a little 3 or 4 song EP. And that fall of 2002, Face to Face came to the embassy to do a show. And Nick Harris from the band, he was a bold man, and he somehow got onto the tour bus after the show and handed Trevor the record that we had done. And Trevor was so interested, and at that time he was working through Vagrant Records and doing a bunch of stuff on his own. I think Antagonist wasn't a thing at that point in time, but he was starting to produce stuff himself and getting into it. And so he really liked the band. He really liked the songs, and he signed the guys, and he took them to LA to do a record. Actually, I think I did a few more EPs with him, and then he brought him down there to do a record, which actually never ended up getting released. But that was sort of like my first connection to Trevor, because Trevor came up to Canada and sat in on one of the EPs that I was doing with Seconds to Go, which was kind of awkward because we all knew that he was taking the band to do a record, but they were coming up, and actually Vagrant paid. The whole thing was kind of odd at that time, but I was like, you know what? It is what it is. Like, I only wanted what was best for the band. So if this was a good stepping stone for them, fantastic. It's easy to feel a little jealousy at the time because it's someone that you sort of honed, and this band you've worked with, and they were babies back then. They were like 16, 17 years old, and but I was like, good for them, like something's gonna happen, and it ended up not happening. They came back to me. We actually did the record about the year that I built the studio, 2006. We ended up finishing a full length with those guys, and they released it, and they did some other stuff, but that was how I first met Trevor, and we got to spend some good quality time together for about a week. I think he stayed up here, and we were all holed up together in a tiny little band house on the singer's property. And then it wasn't even until years after that, so I didn't even have any communication anymore with Trevor until around 2009, 10. So the band Face to Face was just coming back and touring again after their hiatus. And I started a little tiny label that was mostly just to promote some of the bands and records that I was doing at the time. It was just post-recession, so shit was kind of garbage all over, and there wasn't a lot of money to be made. So I started this label to try to do a little bit of promo and stuff. And we were doing a couple of dates on Warp Tour Canada. We had a little booth set up, and we weren't allowed to sell shit, but we were allowed to give away sample CDs, stickers. My wife had made treats. She was making Rice Krispie squares and butter tarts, and we were handing stuff out, and our booth was a big hit, I'll tell you. But and it was at one of those shows, I think it was the Montreal date, Face to Face was playing, and I kind of coaxed Trevor to come over back after the show, and I don't think he recognized me or remembered me right away. It had been it'd been 7 or 8 years, and after a while he recognized me, and we chatted for a bit. And then I think after that, I ended up just going to Nashville just to see him. And before I went to see him, I built him an SSL bus compressor clone just as a gift, just to, you know, I was building one anyway, and I just kind of like gave it to him as a gift. And that was sort of the beginning of our real relationship, that we started working together. He commissioned me to build him some more gear after that. Then Curtis actually did a show with Face to Face in 2013.
Yeah.
And by 15, they had already asked me to do Protection. Actually, that was supposed to, they were inquiring about doing that record, but they ended up having already booked time at Blasting Room. They didn't want to burn bridges. So I didn't actually do any work with the band until they came here without Trevor to do a single. We did The Grind. It was a cover for the last record they put out, the last covers album. And so I did a song with the band. They hung out here for a few days in between shows in late 2016. And then 17, I did the acoustic record with them.
Right.
And then 19, I did the live album with them. And then in the beginning of the pandemic, I did the last record that just came out. So it's been like a long, weird, ebbing and flowing relationship with them, you know, but cool, you know, because I mean, I was a huge fan of the band. So I think it was really neat to be involved with them on that level.
Well, that's kind of cool though, because the fact that you were a fan and then it comes around to you where you actually get to produce, you know, that's like
it's not like it's U2 or like Paul McCartney or you know,
dude,
I mean, but I don't think it matters. I mean, if you're a fan of the band, like
it's
whatever,
face to face. I'll take them over those two
I say
any
that,
day.
but I mean, some of these young kids, I'm like, hey, I did some face to face records, and they're like, who the fuck's that? Get the fuck out of my studio now!
I'll take face to face over U2 and all them any day.
Yeah. So Sieg, I'm gonna blow a little bit of a whistle on this.
Uh-oh.
The face to face live in the dive, I did hear it before it was released.
You did?
Close friend of ours who would be a crocodile hunter, which I'm not gonna name.
Oh, I know it is.
showed myself and Ryan the one night, and oh my god, like it transported me. Like,
oh, cool.
We drove around listening to it in his car.
Actually, I actually think I know about this. I remember he told me. He's like, I hope you don't mind.
I was like, oh my god, this is amazing. Like it was so awesome. And like being able to kind of have that sneak peek. It was
totally,
like,
yeah.
oh
man.
my god.
Special, right? I mean, I felt special working with the band, you know. So
I felt like I was at a show, man. I was like,
well, and that was the intention with that live record. Even though it was actually recorded over 3 nights in Brooklyn, we ended up choosing the best. So it was like a Triple Crown show. So each night was a different album. But at the end of the show, they did a set of their, you know, biggest songs, and they repeated those every night. So out of the whole compilation, we basically chose the best versions from each album. And then from the end of each night, we chose the best one, whatever, you know. And I think I probably even stole bits of songs from, you know, different nights to sort of, I couldn't tell you. It's a whirlwind now in my brain, but you know, I mean, it's a live album, right? So it is what it is. You do what you got to do to make it, you know, and, you know, some of the nights were really, really like, you know, like packed. And I think one of the nights wasn't as packed. So the crowd is different. So you steal the crowd from the, you know, the more popular night and you double up. Like, you know, it's a live album. Like, it ain't no Kiss Alive where it's like completely redone. It's like,
if I have to hear Beth one more time, I shoot somebody.
You know, and I mean, I don't even know how their first live record was done, you know. Because I know they rented like a mobile truck in and tape machines and like it was the 90s, right? So it was a whole different set of equipment back then that was required. And, you know, and who knows what was done in post, you know, I wasn't involved. But as far as this one goes, like it's probably one of the more live albums that I've ever been involved with, because I've done lots of live records over the years with name bands and non-name bands. But there's always a good degree of post work that has to be done, even to the point where you're like, fuck, man, these vocals are shit. The drums are bleeding through. I can't even fix tuning. I can't do anything. So then you go back and you punch in a couple of vocal lines or some guitars or whatever, you know, but this record was about as live as it got. And it sounds great. I mean, I'm very proud of it, you know, and I even mastered it too. And I didn't want to. I was like, I was so deep into it. And they were like, we don't have time, you know, because vinyl takes like fucking 4 to 6 months to press. and they were on a huge deadline. And by the time like the whole master of it was so specific with the segues of songs and the crowd, and it just made more sense to have me do the whole, the layout and all that stuff at that point anyway. So yeah.
Well, kudos, man. Awesome job.
Thank you.
Awesome job.
So tell us a little bit, what happened with the cat box?
Oh, that was a bummer. So that was a cool little space that we had put together. And I had a couple of the guys that would like engineer sessions for me there. And it was in Cambridge, Ontario. So it was very close to Pearson Airport, very close to Toronto, but very, very inexpensive to run. It was in like an old warehouse kind of thing from like the 80s. And we were kind of under a lease from someone else that had a space there, a drummer. But I knew it was a space for a lot of years. He was there for 10. So I wasn't terribly worried about signing anything specific, but the pandemic hit, of course. So we opened that in January of 19. We got a good year out of it before shit went down. And then that second year, it was tough to just keep the bills paid. And during all of that, I think the owners of the building, they were making a lot of changes themselves, and then realized, very quickly into the 2020 year that they could be making a lot more money than they were making off some of these musicians that were taking up a good portion of space, even though much of what we had was like small office space kind of thing. I had one of the bigger spaces in that whole section, but I think the owner just got greedy, and they actually posted the place up for rent even before we were out, which kind of pissed me off because during those 2 years, I actually sunk quite a bit of cash into construction. I built some walls and, whatever I could take with me, I could. Some of the pine walls that I had put up and all my acoustical panels, obviously that was easily removable. But I mean, I probably lost a good, 10 or $20,000 just in what I did put into that space. And, but I mean, a good lesson learned, it's like, but even a lease can be broken from the side of the landlord. There's no rules. I mean, that even happened with the last face-to-face record. Because of the pandemic, I wasn't able to get back across the border to do some of the guitars. So Trevor and the guys ended up booking space with a friend of theirs, and I can't remember who did it. It's in the credits, I'm sure, but I think the guy from Flogging Molly maybe or something. Anyway, same kind of deal. He put a bunch of money into construction in another space. They did that part of that record in May of 2020. By like midsummer, he was already kicked out. So he lost all of his money too. And, shit changes. Like, it's one thing that I built Beachroad the way I did when I did, because I didn't want to put money at that time into anything that wasn't my property. And that wasn't, and the studio here is built on my family property. It's this is everything that we had back home in Germany that my dad sold. And we came to Canada, and this is our space now. So, I mean, we protect it, with everything that we have, so family came to this area when we first moved to Canada, and my dad being a farmer, part of the stipulation of coming into the country was that you would reinvest into the land. So that was part of the immigration, thing. And so obviously he wasn't going to be taking money away from the government. So you settle down, you buy property, you pay taxes, you do all your stuff until you become a Canadian citizen. But I'd always sort of fantasized, because it's a 220-acre farm. It's a good sized area up here, and we're right up to the lake on Lake Huron. But my dad got sick in the mid 90s and became paralyzed, and then kind of was paralyzed, but okay for a few more years until the mid 2000s. And I could see things were declining pretty badly. At that time, I was ready to move on from London. I was at a commercial studio for 4 years there and had done a bunch of work, but I wanted to either move to LA or Nashville or just sort of get out and do stuff. But at the same time, I had this, nagging thing in the back of my mind. My dad is declining further. My mom doesn't drive, and my dad at that time was driving, with hand controls to run errands and do all that kind of stuff. And I knew it was just a matter of time before they were going to take that away. So a lot of things for me collided, but I thought, I always had this like fantasy of building a space with like lodging where a band could stay. And, so I just thought, in 2006, this is the time. I get to do all the things that I need. I could still work. I can have this cool space. I can build my name, but I can also help my family out and run errands with them when I need to. And, family's number one. So I think that to me was the most important thing in life. I don't regret at any point. I mean, I ended up going to LA and doing a bunch of work and living there actually in 2016 for a couple of years. I got my work visa then, and so I've been able to do all the things that I still wanted to do. Because I mean, it's stupid to think, that there's ever a time limit in your life that you can't do something. Like, yeah, sure, it would have been cool if I stayed in LA when I was there when I was 21, but the fact of the matter is I didn't do that. And I came home, I did other stuff, and then I built this place. And, but now seeing the cost of like construction and the cost of labor and materials, and I'm so glad we did this in 2006 and I didn't wait any longer, because this will forever be here in my name and in my family's name, and will always be a home base for me, regardless of where I go and travel, So, yeah.
Well, how did the pandemic change things for you?
How did it change things? It made me realize that I don't want to fucking do anything that I don't want to do anymore. and sadly, that even means not working with certain people just to pay a couple of bills. Because I mean, it's self-employed, right? So some months are great, some months are fucking shit, especially when taxes are due and this is due and that's due, and you're like, whoa, I need about 20 grand right now, real fast. So you take what you can, but I've kind of stopped doing that because I realized some of those projects that I took over those years just to pay a few bills here and there, they weren't satisfying to me at all. And they were more or less just trophy projects for the client that they didn't do anything with. So that didn't help me. I might as well have been working at Starbucks, or I'll go to work at Rona and I'll sell some fucking wood or some shit. Like, I mean, because if I just need a couple of bucks to pay bills, I can do anything. So I think it was important for me to recognize that my time is very valuable to me, and I only have so much of me left. And there are clients that suck your life from you, as we all know, and it's important to recognize your worth and don't accept anything less. So that's probably the most important thing.
That's true in professional and personal life.
Absolutely, yeah. So. And from a personal standpoint, I had some personal things change as well just before the pandemic, which has sort of changed my life drastically. So I'm now going through a divorce at this point in time, but I think it's important to sort of regroup yourself and realize what is important and how you want to forge the next decade of your life, But that's what I was saying before. It's like it's never too late to do the things that you want to do. It's only a mindset. If you're like, oh fuck, I'm 45 now, man, I can't move here, I can't do that, I can't, Fortunately, I don't have children. I don't have anything in my life that's really locking me down, so I'm still able to do what I need to do. I bought a Mercedes Sprinter right at the beginning of the pandemic. And thankfully, that's another thing that I did, because those fucking vans have skyrocketed in price.
Yeah.
And I converted it into a home/recording studio. So it's a control room, it's an office, it's a place that I can sleep. It's got a kitchen, it's got a bathroom. And so now that things are slowly opening up again, my travels back to the US will be a little bit different, because I'll have a workspace and a home that I can take with me, as opposed to wasting all my money on rent/flights/hotel rooms/car rentals, even eating out, so you can stock up your own little, it's a tiny home on wheels, so yeah.
I love it. I love the mix bus, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a long progress, and I've done a lot of work, but even like I'll mix out of it if I'm on the road and doing something, and I'll stop off the 401 on like an en route, and I'll stay there for a day or two. And like truck stops are great because you've got facilities there, you've got Starbucks, you've got food,
lot lizards,
fuel, like it's and the whole vehicle itself is actually very self-sufficient. It's got house batteries, so it's got 800 amp hours, so it charges as I'm driving. It's got solar, so it's it's got running water and everything. So it kind of is its own self-enclosed unit that, to me, I mean, even in a power outage, and we get power outages out here all the time because of the crazy winds off Lake Huron on the coast here.
Oh,
so
for sure.
These days, I don't even fire up generators and stuff anymore. If I lose power, I just go into the bus and I can keep working. I've got a Wi-Fi hotspot in there that runs off the batteries, so I can run for days like that, so it's
wow.
It's
That's
great.
Actually a really good setup. That keeps you from having any technical difficulties, really.
Yeah, there's really no downtime ever. Like I can always, and the rig in the bus is like, there's a 32 IO system that I use in there. So, but I can drag any of my other stuff in there and it all powers up. There's 2,800 watts of inverted like AC power that I can actually use. So it's more power than I would ever personally need, you know, just to even like continue working. So, but it's great because I am on the road all the time. So it sucks to have to keep coming back all this way to the studio just to do a mix revision or a quick master for someone, or, you know, I mean, I'll even do mastering in the van on the road, like just in the box. Like, you know, these days, nobody gives a shit what gear you use anymore. They just need you to get the fucking job done. That's it. You know, and that's kind of exciting because, I mean, for a guy like me that likes gear and likes to tinker and stuff, it's cool, but that stuff can stay here. You know, that can stay here at the studio. And when I'm on the road, I can still do my job and know that the quality doesn't get sacrificed in any way.
Well, I mean, what I'd really like to know, you know, being the Southern California kid, obviously the attitudes and everything around here, you've done Los Angeles. I mean, all the Canadians that Trevor puts in front of us are just the nicest, coolest guys. And you seem like another one of them. How is the air going from working in the US, specifically in places like Los Angeles versus, you know, doing it in Canada and doing your thing where you're at and in your home and everything? How does it differ in the environment?
Are you talking physical air? Like,
no,
we're talking like metaphorically speaking, how is the air vibe?
Yeah, how are the people? How's the vibe? How's the like?
So that's an interesting question because in general, I find everyone that grows up in cold ass climates, so that's the Buffalo dudes, that's, you know, anyone in Canada really, we tend to work a little bit harder. And that's probably because we are freezing all those months and we are shoveling and we're fucking
Just trying to keep warm.
pipes and bullshit. And, you know, so I generally find that we're a little more down to earth and we do work a little bit harder. Anyone who is in warm climates, there's no rush. You know, it's like you're on island time. You're like, fuck, man, we'll get
I'm
to
an
it.
island boy.
I'm here in Florida. I can tell you that there's nothing that frustrates me more than some northern folks coming down here and not driving fast enough.
LA too.
It ain't me because I fucking like to drive. Let me tell you.
I came from the north, so I've been in the freezing cold.
Yeah.
You know, when I came to Florida, it was a whole different environment because, like you said, you're like, it's cold, go get it done, get back to the house and turn the heater on.
Yeah.
You know, and so I come down here and everybody's like, oh, we'll get there eventually. It's like, come on, bro, get out of my way.
You're in Florida. You got all the white hairs there, all the snowbirds, man. Like they're all 80 plus.
I call them the silver alerts.
That's great. Yeah, I mean it's a little different that way, but I mean in general, like dudes in music, you know, we're all trying to do the same thing, and we all work hard. Like, I mean, and the ones that don't, well, they generally don't really, you know, amount to a whole lot. Because I mean, especially like now more than ever, like we have so many ways of doing things, and we have lots of things at our disposal. But so does everyone else.
Right.
So it's like you still got, you know, in the 90s, we didn't have the internet. We'd fly your fucking, you know, poles in the city for your show, and you'd have your cassettes and you'd make, you know, I mean, we always had stuff to do, but it's like now you've got so much more. Like people are doing their own videos and they're doing all their own social media stuff. And it's like there's just a lot to be done all the time. And if you aren't working your balls off, you know, it's just not going to happen because I mean, even when you work your balls off, you still need a team behind you. You know, people talk about, I don't need a label, I want to be independent. And I'm like, cool, like good luck. You know, it's not,
you can have 5 40-hour-a-week jobs.
Yeah, like it's strength in numbers. That's just the way it is. And it's having a team behind you, even if you're an independent artist and all you're needing from the label is some tour support and they're buying you onto tours and all that kind of shit. And it's like, that's still a massive help. Like, I mean, nobody needs a label to make a record anymore. It's like everyone's got some kind of gear at some point that they can do a shitload of work with. You know, you can farm it out, have someone else mix it for you, you know, whatever. The record itself is the least amount of the cost now than ever.
Yeah.
It's everything else that's required.
I used to have an old 4-track reel to reel, man. It's, you know, so, you know, now I can do that plus on a little tiny program right here.
That's right. But you can't do the marketing and you can't necessarily get it on the Spotify playlists and all the other playlists, and you can't really book the tours, and you can't get good opening dates, and you might get one-offs if you work your balls off in your local areas. but you're going to do a cross country opening act for a fucking huge band that you think is going to do something. It's just, you can't, there's no way. And you still need that extra help, and you need that team backing you,
Yeah.
Well, I hear you grind some axes, and a little birdie told me you got some serious guitars. What's up with your collection?
I got a few guitars. Yeah. I mean, I got some okay stuff. I got a lot of shit. But when I say shit, like junk or Epiphones that I've like done some mods to, you change some pickups, you change the tuners, you change a bridge piece, and all of a sudden it's a pretty okay guitar. And sometimes maybe you've
and once you rebuild it, yeah.
Well, that's just it, right? Like, it's no longer a piece of shit anyway. So, but I mean, a lot of my guitars, like, I'll keep them at certain tunings, because deviating from that, maybe one's a drop C for some of the metal shit, and it'll have EMGs and whatever in it, and maybe another one's just half step down. And because when you deviate from the tuning, they really don't love it, and it takes a while to settle in, and then you got to adjust the truss and all that kind of shit. And so I kind of like to leave a lot of my instruments sort of what they are. Like, it's like some guys will do that with outboard gear. Even it's like they keep one compressor, one EQ at one setting. The Lord Alges were always, people blame that they don't do anything. They just leave all the pieces. If they want another sound, they'll just buy a second one. And that seemed extravagant 25 years ago. But then you start working and you fucking realize that is smart. That's having a system and not wasting your fucking time, because you only got so many hours in a day that you can get anything done. You think I want to sit there and fucking set up another guitar for like another 4 hours? Like, no. I'm gonna grab that fucking thing, and I expect it to just work, plug it in, get the goddamn guitar part done, so I can get on to the next fucking thing that I gotta do.
So what you got is that you've probably got, like other people, that you've got your studio set, and you've got your stage beaters.
Yeah, I wouldn't even say stage beaters anymore, because I'm not doing a whole lot of stage stuff these days.
Right.
But I still have my SG, which now has become more and more precious to me, that I probably wouldn't even play it out anymore. I'd be afraid it got stolen or broken or something. So I'd probably take a piece of shit Epiphone. You can buy like a single pickup, like a $69 used, like little Epi Junior, pop a better pickup into it and just use it. If someone fucking grabs it and smashes it or swipes it, big deal. It's not a huge problem. But yeah, I mean, I definitely have things that like, they're my go-tos, and when people come here, I have a lot of bands. There's actually someone coming here tomorrow. They're literally bringing nothing but like a set of sticks, so it's nice. I mean, I can have people fly here and not get harassed crossing the border with a bunch of gear, and all they can do, they just have to say that they're coming to visit a friend. They don't need paperwork for recording and that kind of shit. Just show up and we can just work on stuff here, and again, I'm also a few hours away from any real, rental places or anything. So it was important for me to have enough stuff here to make an artist or a client feel very comfortable and never feel like you're missing anything.
Well, that's actually a really smart move to have the musical instruments ready for people to get this stuff, because that just, like you said, that just makes it that much easier for everybody.
Totally, yeah. And even my kit is like, it's always mic'd up and ready to go. So when we actually, are getting drum sounds, if it takes me longer than like 20 minutes to get drum sounds, it's not the right drummer or the kit. The rest of it fucking. Yeah. And at that point, if it's not the right drummer, I just gotta bite my lips and just fucking get it done.
Did they ever get a little? Now, I haven't been in a band, and our drummer was finicky. When I say finicky, it's like he didn't mind me helping load in and load out, but once I set it on stage, just don't touch my shit.
Yeah, so you're not allowed to touch the kit. Yeah.
He said he'll bring it in for me and I'll set it up. And he was very particular about how every tom went. How
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So do they come into your studio and like rearrange your shit all of a sudden?
Yeah, absolutely. That kit is never the fucking same before, and I can see, I can never really put it back to however I think I want it. I don't even know how I want it. So when I actually do play on records, it's usually however the last drummer set it up, and I just adapt. I just make it work, and I don't play drums on a ton of records, but I'd say every couple months I do something.
Oh, I saw you just played drums on a record recently.
I did. Yeah. I did. A good friend of mine. I'm doing a record with her, and we're both writing it together. And that's actually a really cool project because her name's Harley Olivia, and I did a bunch of records with her. She's in a metal band, and this is her solo thing that she's doing. But she doesn't play an instrument, so she's got a phenomenal voice, and she writes her lyrics first, and then she puts her melodies to it, and then she brings me that, and then I actually write music to it. So, and her pitch is impeccable, so she's already in her brain figured out what key she wants the song to be in. And so I'll grab the guitar and be like, yeah, well, that actually G, C, D works over that part. And then she'll say, actually, I don't like that D. Can you do something different? I'll be like, all right, how about this? And I'll do something different. And we write the song that way. And it's very different from the way I've ever written. Because for me, it's always been, I wrote some shit on a guitar, then I'm going to write a melody, and I'm going to scat and sound like an idiot, but no one's going to hear me. And even when I put the demo down, it usually sounds like this, because I'm just worried about a melody, and lyrics were always last. That was sort of a Cobain mentality. You know, the guy wrote like lyrics in the cab on the way to the studio half the time.
Right.
You know, so, but in her case, it's the exact opposite. And I find it's actually very freeing because I have leeway over the tempo a little bit. I can change chords. I can do some really wacky shit, and I'll insert stuff. I'll say, hey, that part needs a bridge, or, you know, let's change that pre-chorus to be like this. And she's always very open to making changes like that. So it's a 6-song EP, but the whole thing is like, it's just the two of us. We're not really hiring anyone else to do anything on it. And it's just a lot of fun. It's a really cool project.
Awesome.
Well, from a production standpoint, how much influence do you give the artist? Because like when we recorded our album, we listened to the guy behind the glass because he had heard so many people.
Of course, yeah.
You automatically hear, you need to bring that up. And we just, instead of arguing with him, it's like, hey, we'll do it. So how much influence?
I think at this point in my career, the majority of clients that are coming to me to and pay me my rate to do records with me, they're here to listen to me. So if I give them suggestions, but they're also here to fight with me. So if there's something they truly believe in, and I'm like, that song fucking sucks, or this song needs to be 10 beats faster, and they're like, no, it feels gross at 210. It's got to be at 200. Prove to me what you're fighting for, and make me believe it. Because if you can't convince me, then you're not going to convince anybody, I think. But I mean, in general, my clients come to me because they do trust me. They like the records I've done, so, and I'm there. I mean, but there are records when bands come in and they are honed, and it's really just a matter of capturing it, editing and tightening performances, whether that is, physically in the room saying, let's do that again, do it again, do it again, do it again, or sit behind Pro Tools and edit for an hour and tweak it to, that last 5% where it needs to go. Like, and then there's bands that need a lot of work. They need help co-writing even, but that's the thing with being a producer of my nature. Co-writing and production is sort of a fine line, and sometimes I'm writing parts for people or changing chords, and I don't consider that songwriting, even though some people be like, well, we should list you down because, I mean, nah, man, unless I specifically, changed an entire chorus for you, wrote a whole new melody, changed the entire chord structure, I don't believe in that. I think if I just made some like basic changes to what you came to me with, that just means I did my job as a producer. That's all that is, that didn't, but I mean, in the case of, a record like we're doing with Harley there, that's definitely more co-writing, because I mean, I'm writing the music, she's doing the lyrics and the melodies, and that's a true, combination of songwriting.
That's awesome.